All right, welcome back, everyone. We're getting set up for our next presentation here, and here's my dog. She's just in time, working from home. This next topic I think is super interesting. I mentioned, so it's called the new jet set, the rise of concierge travel and keeping clients protected. So it's going to kind of come at it from two angles. Obviously, the transportation side. So we're going to be talking to Helinet here and kind of what they offer and what they do in the space. And then we're also going to be looking at it from the insurance and the risk and the protection side of things. So this one is a little bit of a hybrid. It also does have one CPE credit. So throughout the hour, we'll be posting questions and then the evaluation form at the very end. So just pay attention to the chat. But we're going to start out with two kind of short presentations, first from Allison and then from Joe. Let me just introduce Allison a little bit. Allison joined Helinet in 2014 to lead the company's marketing and became SVP of Marketing and Biz Dev in October of 2018. She's responsible for overseeing the formation of business partnerships and managing the company's strategic and operational marketing activities. She's also the VP of Marketing for Shotover Systems, a developer of high-performance gyro-stabilized aerial camera systems. That sounds awesome. She previously worked at PR firms SSA, PR, and Carl Shamrock Public Relations. So, Allison, I think, why don't you go ahead and get started with your screen share, and then I will introduce the second speaker, Joe, after you run through your deck.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it. Ooh. Can you see
Cool.
it okay?
Looks great. Yep.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks again, Matthew, for the great warm welcome, and thanks to everybody out there who tuned in for our presentation. As Matthew mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about the rise of private transportation, especially in 2020, and how we're seeing it evolve now with the changing times. And of course, very importantly, keeping our clients protected during private transportation. So I want to start off by just telling you guys a little bit about Helinet and what we do. So we are a full service helicopter company. We're based out at Van Nuys Airport in Los Angeles, California. So we do a lot of different missions with our helicopters. And I'm going to just show a quick short video that kind of showcases the different markets that we serve. Give this a go and see if we can get that up. All right, can you see my presentation again okay?
That's perfect.
Okay. Were you able to hear the video okay, Matthew?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully you guys were able to see that and hear that, but we offer a wide variety of services, helicopter services. So we service the medical, charter, production, firefighting, and news communities. One of the biggest things we do here at Helinet, beyond VIP transportation, is we do air medical flights for all the major hospitals in Los Angeles and beyond, really in Southern California. So we're using our VIP executive charter aircraft to transport organs and medical teams. So obviously safety and protection is of utmost importance to these hospitals. So it goes with with Helinet's reputation of really supplying that safety to our client base. So in addition to helicopter services, we also provide full service aircraft management, and we do jet and car transportation as well for our clients. So some things that really we pride ourselves here at Helinet, and one of the biggest things is we are an accident-free Part 135 operation. So that means our charter operations and what we do here at Helinet since we've started. So we've been in business since 1987, so for over 33 years now. And that reputation is largely in part due to our rigorous safety requirements and training that we do with all of our pilots. And all the training that we do is going to be annual and recurrent, internally and externally, to keep up those standards. We also have the largest fleet of twin-engine helicopters in Southern California. So a lot of high net worth individuals, folks traveling private, they're going to be requiring twin-engine helicopters as that added safety feature. We also have 24/7 services, so we know people flying private. A lot of times their schedules are changing quite frequently, so therefore we accommodate that with 24/7 service. We also have a 24/7 flight following department, so they're keeping our clients' business managers and assistants up to date on every detail of their flight, when they're taking off, when they're landing, when they're close to landing, all that good stuff. And then in addition to that, with our safety, we have state-of-the-art weather and flight tracking systems in all of our aircraft, as well as in our dispatch center. So there are a lot of different benefits to flying private. I think a lot of us know now in the evolving world, and what we're seeing with the current pandemic, a big benefit of flying private is going to be avoiding crowds and practicing social distancing. So in addition to avoiding crowds and flying with people that you're comfortable with and your family, we also professionally clean each one of our aircraft after each charter flight to ensure they are ready to go for each new client. We also provide disposable headset covers and mic buffs to make sure that added level of protection is there for our clients. Flying in comfort, obviously, is a big attraction to flying private. You're not going to be crammed into a commercial aircraft with a lot of people you don't know. As you'll see a little bit later on, we have different aircraft configurations for our VIP helicopters that accommodate different group sizes and luggage requirements that our clients have. Another great thing about flying private is the personalized flight requests. We can really drill down with our clients on what the details of their flights are. So, instead of always flying airport to airport, we can, a lot of the times, can land right on site or close to a site where a client is going, let's say, to a resort, or let's say they're in the entertainment industry and they're heading to a production. We can, a lot of the times, land by that production. And then, of course, you can get to your desired destination within minutes, not hours. So Southern California, obviously notoriously known for traffic here, as you can see this picture kind of demonstrates. And yeah, that's one of the big benefits of flying private. So kind of what I was talking with before, we have custom trips. That's one of the things that we really pride ourselves here on the charter department, that we tailor to our customers' needs. So you can see, as I was talking about landing in unique locations, the bottom picture highlights, we recently landed at a golf course for a golf tournament, and that required a lot of logistics on our end. We had personnel on the ground coordinating everything with the golf course, making sure it was safe and everything was timed appropriately. The golfers were where they needed to be safely. We worked closely with Marsh to make sure we had the correct insurance certificates in place prior to our landing. And then, as you can see on the top, there's a couple other images that illustrate some events that we've done recently. So that top photo showcases a wedding. So we actually landed at a rooftop in downtown LA, getting a groom to his after party with his parents. So we can do a lot of nice customized things, getting champagne in the helicopter. We can work with events centers and just time everything out perfectly to a client's request. So as I mentioned, one of the biggest benefits of flying private is going to be that time. As you can see, we're based in Southern California, so these are some of those travel times that I mentioned that really put in perspective of the benefits of flying private and not sitting in that 405 traffic. So you can see getting from the west side to downtown can, take notorious amounts of time. In one of our helicopters, 5 minutes. We can get you to the airport from the Hidden Hills area in 10 minutes, and even out to Santa Barbara from LAX in 35 minutes. So now I want to talk a little bit about our charter fleet. So we started at Helinet with 1 helicopter back in 1987. Since then, we've grown to over 20 helicopters. So the Sikorsky S-76 is going to be our most luxurious helicopter for VIP travel. It's got speeds that go over 180 miles an hour. We have multiple aircraft in this configuration for our VIP clients. You can see in the one image on the right-hand side, that's going to sit 6 passengers. You got the captain's chairs, a lot of leg room. A lot of our athletes love that aircraft. And most recently, we added another Sikorsky C++ to our fleet. And that would have 2 bench seats in the back, so that can seat up to 8 passengers. But it's a beautiful, beautiful aircraft. It can hold up to 300 pounds of luggage, so it's great for overnight trips or throwing some golf bags in there and going out on a nice leisure trip for the day. This is the Leonardo AW109. So we have 4 of these in our fleet. I like to call this the limo in the sky. It's another great VIP aircraft that our clients love. It can sit 4 to 6 passengers, just depending on weight and size. But it is a powerful aircraft, very smooth, comfortable ride, and great for charter. And this is our last type of airframe that we have for VIP charter. This aircraft, as you can see, is not going to be as luxurious inside, but it is great to beat the traffic, and it is great for sightseeing. It's got a beautiful panoramic views with the windows, and it is quite an experience when you're up there. So as I mentioned, we're based out in Southern California. We can fly beyond Southern California. A lot of the times, we will get requests to go out to, let's say, Las Vegas or San Francisco. While we can accommodate those requests, and we've had those requests and done them where people like to have that scenic route, a lot of the times it does make sense to take a jet over a helicopter for such a long flight. So you can see I've highlighted some of the common places that we can land. One of the biggest benefits, of course, of a helicopter is that you can land in unique places. So like I mentioned before, we can land at rooftops in downtown Los Angeles. We've just opened up a private helipad in the Hidden Hills area. A lot of high net worth individuals are out in that area, and we can get you out to LAX or to the airport really quickly, or even to the west side. We also have off airport landing locations in the Santa Barbara area. We can also take people out to Catalina, and then Orange County and San Diego are another very popular destinations to get business travelers out quickly out of the city. Another thing at Helinet that we just launched here within the last year is our mobile booking app. So it's been very well received by our clients, really popular with them. It's just another added level of convenience. So if you don't want to have to pick up the phone and deal with the back and forth, we can easily rebook a past trip. You explore different package and experience options, which include hotel suites and restaurants that we've included in those services as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to quickly touch on our aircraft management. So this is a big added benefit that a lot of our high net worth individuals have really gravitated to, is the fact that we can, if you're looking to purchase an aircraft, we can help you source the perfect aircraft. And then also help you charter it, so you're making money on that aircraft when you're not using it for personal use. So during the sourcing the perfect aircraft, it can be a timely and lengthy process. So our aviation professionals will go out and they'll help find which aircraft is right for you. In addition, we will also help with the pre-buying process. So if we can send out one of our mechanics to take a look at the aircraft and make sure that there's no inspections due right before, that the seller shouldn't be paying for before you get that aircraft, that it's charter ready, the interior's ready to go. We can also help find a great completion center if the aircraft does need any modifications prior to your purchase. And one of the great things about after you purchase the aircraft, what's the good benefit about being with Helinet and letting us manage that aircraft for you is we have such a large pilot base. So if you do require pilots around the clock, we can make that happen. We also have a nice big space here at Van Nuys Airport, so we can get you ramp and hangar space, of course, fuel, and then you don't have to worry about finding the right mechanic for your aircraft. We have our own maintenance department in-house, so that's another great added benefit. If any long-term or quick maintenance comes up, we can take care of that for you. Another great thing about chartering aircraft for your personalized aircraft is empty leg flights. So let's say you are heading down to San Diego for the weekend, but you just want to, take your helicopter one way and then be out there for a while. We can work on getting the trip back to LA from your aircraft full on a charter flight, so that flight gets paid for. Another great thing about aircraft management is going to be the tax benefits. So if you have your aircraft for the first year and 50% of the flight time is used for charter, you can get that sales tax waived. So that's obviously a big benefit. So a lot of great different things about aircraft management and chartering your aircraft if you decide that you do want a private operator like Helinet to take that on for you. So that concludes kind of an overview on Helinet and my presentation. So now I'll pass it back to Matthew, and I know Joe's going to talk a little bit more about the insurance side of aviation and aircraft management and chartering.
Awesome. Thanks, Allison. I think Joe was having some issues with his computer, so we're trying to get him connected right now. Maybe
let me share my screen here.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, hit that guy. Perfect. So
did I get you?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, you're good. So we'll see. All right, hopefully we can get Joe up and running here. Allison, I have a question for you.
Yeah, of course.
So this is kind of connected to a panel that we have coming up a little bit later around celebrities and entertainment folks expanding their revenue sources. I was wondering if you could kind of dive into a little bit just how the business model, the management service works in terms of you guys leasing it out. I think that's kind of an interesting option for some of these entertainment clients.
Yeah, so more of the chartering the aircraft, got it, for aircraft management. So I think I mentioned this before, but Helinet's been doing VIP charter transportation for a long time now. It was one of the first business lines that we got into over 30 years ago. So we've really become well known for providing, top of the line service with aircraft and just having that uncompromising dedication to safety. And the helicopter charter industry really is a small one with only a handful of players. So when someone on the West Coast is looking to acquire a helicopter for personal use and, doesn't want to have to worry about all the complexities that go into managing an aircraft, we're usually one of the first people that they call. So we did find that a big mutual benefit of putting an aircraft on our Part 135 from a private owner was, that revenue that we get from that, and the fact that Helinet doesn't have to necessarily acquire, an additional brand new aircraft to offer to our charter clients, that aircraft we can use for our charter clients, and then the private owner can also use that to make some money. So one of our clients, for example, he's had his aircraft here with us for at least 5 years now. And we do a lot of our medical flights with the organ teams with that aircraft. So we've, been able to generate a lot of revenue for him. So what's great about that is when he flies for personal, he's essentially flying for free. He doesn't have to pay for he pays for the fuel, but essentially that revenue he's getting, it offsets the fuel cost and the insurance cost. Another great benefit of that is, that we do all the marketing and the selling of the aircraft for charter services. The owner and his management team doesn't have to worry about that. There's a lot of different ways that we market our aircraft. We have a very well-known established charter clientele within the LA area and beyond. We have we've long-standing relationships with different operators out on the East Coast as well, that they're continuously sending new clients our way. So there's a lot of, mutual benefits to both sides of that. So that's kind of how we got into aircraft management and saw the benefit of that, and, why we love to take on that challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it sounds like a pretty sweet deal. I mean, especially with an asset of that value not sitting there, and essentially you guys handling it as kind of a full stack service, like you said. I mean, I'm curious. A lot of the panels from earlier today have touched like COVID has worked its way into kind of every angle, and I guess I'm assuming that affected you guys and just flights in general and travel habits in probably a lot of different ways. I mean, I'm thinking obviously nobody wants to be in like a Delta flight packed into a tube with everyone else. So they're probably looking at options like you guys that are private, but then there's also production shutdowns, which hopefully I think are now hopefully coming back. But I guess could you just speak to just in terms of trends, kind of what you guys are seeing, how your aircraft is being utilized, and by maybe what types of clients?
Yeah, no, definitely. So it's a great question. So yeah, we've seen some interesting trends since COVID. Here at Helinet, we're pretty lucky that we're such a diverse company. So when certain business lines may not be as busy, there's other ones that tend to pick things up for the whole. So with our charter, we did see an initial drop just because nobody was leaving their house. There was no travel, there was no business travel, and a good portion of our VIP travel is going to be for celebrities and high net worth individuals who just don't have time to sit in traffic. So that was that initial drop. However, we've seen, people were getting a little restless and stir crazy after the first couple months of shutdown, and they were just looking to kind of get away in Southern California, but in a private and safe environment. So, we get requests to want to go to, exclusive house rentals where you're still socially distancing and isolating yourself, but you're at least getting out of your own house. So we saw a trend there where people were just trying to get out. And now we're seeing that the business travel is starting to pick back up a little bit. And productions, we've definitely seen an increase there. As I mentioned, a lot of it is of our clientele is celebrities who are going to set for productions. And another part of Helinet's business is aerial production services. So that side of the business we saw was quiet for at least a few months. And now that production department on our end is ramping up and, just really taking off again. And we're seeing the clients requesting to go back to set again, which is great. And there's just a lot of overlap between our production and charter department for that reason. So we say that somebody's going to be booking our aerial services. They want a camera system and one of our helicopters to shoot aerial content. Their travel agents also going to call us and say, hey, I need to get talent out to set for a week as well. So there's a lot of synergies there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. And I think, a lot of the other panels today have talked about kind of risk in a lot of ways. And I think that's kind of the business manager's job, especially dealing with, all sorts of entertainment clients that might not be, as, they might not be thinking about it maybe 24/7, but I think the business managers are. And I think, obviously when I'm thinking of, say booking a helicopter to take me to a set or something, convenience is kind of top of mind. But I think obviously beyond that, and honestly, the core of it really is safety and pilot training, and keeping the aircraft well maintained. So I guess, can you kind of speak maybe to those angles of what you guys do at Helinet?
Yeah, no, definitely. So, as I mentioned earlier, pilot training and safety, I should say, is just our number one priority across all the business lines and all the customers and markets that we serve. Safety is of utmost importance. So when it comes to pilots, we do annual and recurrent training with all of our pilots. And what's great is we do internal training and external training. So we like to get that outside perspective with training. So that external training is really a value add there as well. And as I mentioned, all of our pilots for charter have at least 2,000 flight hours, and most likely a lot more than that when they fly charter with us.
Nice.
And another great thing, I guess, going back to the pilots and safety, that's great, is let's say that, a pilot checks the weather and they need to cancel due to weather. Well, instead of the pilot talking directly to the client, where the client might, really want to take that flight and try and, maybe throw some pressure there. What we always have is the client will talk directly to our charter manager, so the pilot doesn't feel that pressure. We want to make sure, that he's making decisions that are safety's first, and that's always the number one priority. So when it comes to risk on our end, before every flight, each one of our pilots, they go through what we call a flight risk assessment tool. So they complete this before each flight, and they go through essentially a checklist to make sure that all the conditions are in our favor for a safe flight. And let's say that they go through this checklist and they check too many boxes that might be, more towards risk. Then our chief pilot or our director of ops will jump in and need to make sure that that flight is safe before it goes. So we have a lot of layers added in to make sure that safety is, again, number one priority, and we're doing everything we can to ensure a safe flight. In addition to safety, so we also have a safety management system internally. So we have a safety committee that meets regularly internally. So it's going to be people from all different departments in a company. They identify potential hazards and risks, and then just employee reports in general, just to ensure, again, that safety is top of mind, and that we're doing everything we can as a company to mitigate risk. I can see Joe.
Yeah,
we was able to hop on. It's good to see you, Joe.
I think maybe the audio isn't coming through with Joe.
Well, we get to see him, but we're starting progress. So yes, I think you asked me about safety, pilot training, and risk. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I think maybe we also have Joe. I think you might just try to refresh and come back in. Sometimes that'll kick the audio back on, because it looks like your audio should be on, but I know we actually heard you earlier too. Let me look at my questions. Yeah, and I think you had kind of mentioned this, but you guys actually started, I think, as on the production side, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. So our founder, so we're a family-owned company, and our founder was Alan Purwin. So he, started the company from the ground up, and he started out as a crop duster helicopter pilot in Indiana just to build up time. But he did end up breaking into the entertainment industry, and his first production was in 1984, Airwolf, I believe. But yeah, that was one of the core parts of our business and still is to this day. But, he worked on every feature film under the sun, go-to aerial coordinator. So everything from Pearl Harbor, Transformers, Fast and Furious, you name it. So being an aerial coordinator and a stunt pilot, and, with that, of course, there's a lot of, risk mitigation and pre-planning, before every flight, just to make sure that everything is as safe as possible when you're doing stuff like that. And yeah, now to this day, it's still a big part of the business. Beyond helicopters, we have a fleet of 14 drones that we use for aerial filming and production. We also have camera systems. We have jets we use to do aerial filming. We just shot Top Gun 2 with our jet platform, and we have Blackhawks that are featured in TV shows.
I'm gonna come work for you guys. Do you guys have any openings or whatever? This sounds like anyone's dream, honestly.
Yeah, it's a pretty diverse, cool company.
Yeah, excellent. Hey, Joe, I think now we hear you.
Oh, thank goodness. I appreciate it.
All right.
Patience.
Now we're cooking. So Joe, I think you have a presentation from your side. We're pushing the envelope here, I think, in terms of technology, but do you want to try to screen share and run through that?
Sure, I'll do it here.
Okay.
And appreciate Allison kind of taking that waiting on insurance isn't necessarily the most sexy topic, but certainly getting a chance to hear about Helinet and those operations.
Well, I know the business managers are concerned with the insurance side, so it's the theme of the day, I think, is protection and risk and everything that you guys do. So if you're looking, so the screen share button is at the bottom.
Yep.
Okay. And we'll let you know when it pops up.
Is it working?
No. Yep. Something's coming up. Nice.
There
Yep,
we go.
you're good.
All right, so I'll try and keep us. Some technology issues have sort of delayed this, but really what we want to talk a little bit about in this particular section is aircraft liability, and specifically when it comes to the transportation and travel that Allison's outlined and Helinet provide and sort of the corporate world. Who can be sued, and really what does liability mean? Who needs protection? Most important. I also think it's important to talk about how do the operators themselves determine liability. Certainly want to talk about and give you in terms of loss examples out there, and sort of end with how this group can protect themselves. So simply put, liability is the state of being responsible for something, especially failure to meet that responsibility can leave you open to a lawsuit in which the party who suffered an injury due to that failure seeks payment for the resultant damages. Liability applies to the legal responsibility for acts or omissions. Civil litigation cases may arise from motor vehicle accidents, slip and fall accidents, injury to or by defective products. In other cases, negligence caused an accident. As a general principle, insurance follows legal liability. What's interesting is states regulate intrastate transportation of passengers and cargo by land or water. The federal government regulates interstate or foreign transportation by land or water. And some of those regulations stipulate that a vehicle provided by the operator must reasonably be strong and sufficient for the task that the driver or pilot be careful and reasonably skilled. Drivers are also obligated to use the customary precautions for the safety of passengers. So who can be liable? Just get this moving here. At all times, anyone in the United States has a legal duty to act responsibly so to avoid injuring people or property. When people fail to meet that legal duty, they may be liable for resulting injuries to others. In a court of law, no intent needs to be shown in order for the responsible party to be found negligent and therefore liable. And that's important because that really does play as we're talking about, what to expect and who, in terms of the chain of commerce, could be brought into a lawsuit. The duty to act responsibly is the normal duty of care that applies in most situations. However, in some situations, the law imposes a greater duty of care. For example, common carriers, including bus, train, and aircraft operators, owe a particularly high duty of care to their passengers. Likewise, the Code of Federal Regulations provide that no person may operate an aircraft in a careless or reckless manner so to endanger life, property, or of another, and that vigilance shall be maintained by each person for operating an aircraft so to avoid other aircraft. Pretty simple stuff. But with specific regard to airlines, a common carrier by air must exercise a high degree of care consistent with the practical operation of the plane for the safety of its passengers. And that was proven and is a case in law, Andrews versus United, back in 1994. As such, an aircraft operator or pilot may be held liable for the passenger's injuries when an operator is just even marginally at fault. So who needs liability protection? State and federal regulators require that land and water carriers secure liability insurance to meet financial responsibility requirements. Financial ability to cover potential loss. However, few states actually regulate the transportation by air, and federal regulations pertaining to the procurement of insurance typically only apply to commercial air carriers, airlines, and carriers for hire. Only 5 states have some type of liability insurance requirement, while 6 have a financial responsibility requirement for general aviation. Those states that do regulate transportation by air require that minimal limits of liability actually only apply, and in those cases, only $100,000 per seat. Following an aircraft accident, it's very likely that the owner, the operator, the maintenance provider, the pilots, the charter customer in some cases of a chartered aircraft, the manufacturer of the aircraft, and any component part will be named as defendants in a subsequent lawsuit. It's difficult to predict how much plaintiffs will sue for, and ultimately, as a practical matter, liability is often apparently assessed less on the facts and actual fault than a perceived ability for a defendant to actually absorb a claim. The following are some damages and expenses that may be recoverable in the event of a liability suit. Bodily injury to passengers on board the aircraft, bodily injury to passengers on another aircraft, damage to another aircraft, damage to property on the ground, medical expenses, loss of earnings, loss of use, pain and suffering, loss of consortium, emotional distress, and punitive damages. What does liability protection actually provide? Liability insurance coverage is designed to cover bodily injury and property damage of another party, for which you are legally responsible, as well as your legal defense costs. The insurance policy is a legal contract between the responsible party, meaning the insured, and the insurance company. In return for the paid premium, the insurance company agrees to pay for covered claims you become legally obligated to pay for as damages. The maximum amount the insurance company will pay is agreed upon prior to inception of coverage and is the total amount a company will pay for all damages, including bodily injury and property damage, including those of third parties. Liability insurance will cover punitive damages unless excluded and not allowed to be covered by law. And that's important because punitive damages are actually not covered in many states because that's the court penalizing a company for egregious acts. General aviation aircraft hull and liability policies are specifically limited to respond to damages resulting from the maintenance, use, or operation of the aircraft, including claims arising from alcoholic beverages on board the aircraft, and may extend to aircraft premises as well. Although the risk of loss must be related, most aircraft policies are an all-risk policy, which means coverages of causes are covered unless specifically excluded under the policy. In addition to some basic aircraft hull and liability coverage, general aviation aircraft hull and liability policies may also include the following ancillary coverages in relation to the maintenance or use of the aircraft. So it'll include the premises. So if somebody's coming down the steps and trips and falls because of ice or a water condition, you may have personal effects and baggage coverage. Personal injury, which pays for the damage for false arrest, detention, imprisonment, malicious prosecution, violation of rights of privacy or discrimination. You may also have trip interruption. So if something happens mid-flight, an incident takes place and you have to land, the cost to get you either back to your home base or the intended destination would also be covered. Non-owned aircraft liability is also interesting and probably more important to this group. It is one of the more broadly applied coverages in the general aviation market. Non-owned aircraft liability is a legal liability protection placed to protect the named insured. So if it's a client, if it's a celebrity, if it's a company, for their claims arising from bodily injury or property damage that may arise using a non-owned aircraft. So an aircraft that's been chartered on your behalf. This coverage will defend a suit brought against you, even if the suit is groundless, and pay on your behalf up to policy limits if you're found to have any negligence arising from the maintenance, use, or operation of that non-owned aircraft. A few examples. If your firm, if a principal or someone that you look after has chartered an aircraft, there may be liability for their vetting of that operation, or may have overlooked safety or something along those lines. An employee or family member may fly on their own aircraft or may fly for company business. Their employees may charter, borrow, rent an aircraft. So there's a couple, two incidents that I want to talk about briefly as it relates to non-owned aircraft liability, which I think are important. Individuals were returning from a business trip when their twin-engine aircraft crashed just before landing. A wrongful death lawsuit was filed against the estate of the pilot, claiming negligence. The pilot was a financial advisor from a global financial services firm, and the suit was brought against the pilot, the employer, and the employees because they were using a non-professional pilot while flying on company business. The NTSB determined that the crash resulted in an airspeed during the approach and landing, causing the aircraft to crash and stall. The suits were settled for $15 million, one of the largest lawsuits at that point in time. The financial services firm revised their travel policy to prohibit employees from using company aircraft or private aircraft on company business. Another one which is interesting is a professional singer and her crew of 6 were killed when the aircraft they had chartered crashed in the Caribbean. Their manager and recording producer arranged for the charter of an aircraft that was too small for the passengers, their load, and their baggage. The aircraft was over its maximum weight by over 700 pounds, and when the aircraft crashed shortly after takeoff, taking the lives of the 8 people on board, preliminary information indicated the pilot was not approved to act as a pilot in command in the incident aircraft. The music video production company and producer were all sued in excess of $100 million for their liability. The aircraft operator only purchased a $2 million limit. A wrongful death lawsuit was filed by the singer's parents and was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum. What liability do we need, and how does an operator look, and how do they determine coverage? Well, it's a question we're asked a lot, and basically it's what liability limit do we need? Because there's a high potential for catastrophic loss, one of the more important decisions an owner, risk manager, or any kind of manager can make is what liability limit to purchase. You certainly can't predict how much you'll be sued for, and in turn makes it almost impossible to gauge exactly how much coverage you'll need. There's no definitive method to determine the appropriate liability coverage to select, but the following can guide in terms of selecting the reasonable limit based on your particular exposures. The number of passengers in an aircraft, as an example. An aircraft with 14 seats may present a significantly greater exposure and necessitate a higher limit than that with 7 seats. We also look at the type of aircraft and sort of apply minimum limits based on the aircraft type. So a light jet, like a small Citation, the minimum we would look for in a case like that would be $100 million. A super mid-sized jet like a Challenger 300 could be 100 million. A super mid like a Falcon 2000, 150 million, and a large cabin long-range airplane, $200 million of liability protection. Rotor wing aircraft with 50. We're often asked for jury verdict information, but unfortunately, information is not readily available as a majority of the aviation losses are settled out of court and subject to confidentiality agreements with all the involved parties. But we can say with reasonable certainty that within the airline industry, the average death benefit claim, and again, we haven't had an aircraft, an accident in the US in some time, but the average aircraft liability settlement on an airline right now is between $7 and $10 million per person. Passengers on corporate aircraft are typically much higher net worth, and that should also be taken into consideration when choosing an aircraft liability limit. And as mentioned earlier, it is also sufficient to cover third-party bodily injury and property resultant damage. So how do we protect ourselves? First, seek protection under the primary aircraft operator's policy, gaining insured status under their policy on a primary layer of coverage. Collect a certificate of insurance, which will include additional insured status, waiver of subrogation, which basically waives any rights that the insurer of that operator would come against you for. Make sure that operator's policy is primary, because we're going to talk about non-owned aircraft insurance in a second, which will be excess and solely for your benefit. But really right now, one of the more important provisions to maintain is a breach of warranty, meaning protect your interests as under the primary policy without any kind of invalidation of that policy without your knowledge. Make sure that you also have a 30-day notice of cancellation and that you evidence the minimum limits that we talked about in the previous slide. Just going back one, sorry here. So non-owned aircraft liability insurance, including both non-owned and physical damage, is important. Although the aircraft owner and operator's policy should protect your customer, make sure that the non-owned policy is for your benefit. Even though you're using an aircraft operated and insured by others as an entity which caused that flight to happen, it's very likely you'll be named as a defendant in any kind of lawsuit arising from the use of that aircraft. Unfortunately, liability is also, as I said before, not assessed on fact or fault, but rather ability to defend and absorb a claim. Since all non-owned aircraft liability is excess above any valid and collectible insurance, solely for your benefit, it's pertinent to make sure that you understand all the underwriting information. Low limits on an owner's policy or an operator's policy could adversely impact non-owned aircraft liability premium and actually have your program sublimited if you can't determine or actually indicate that there's significant primary liability protection. One scenario is an executive or celebrity, a non-professional pilot who flies his own aircraft or had his own business or his or her own business. As a non-professional pilot, there just may not be high limits of liability available. This would impact their ability to obtain, or your ability to obtain, a non-owned aircraft liability coverage for your firm's protection, and maybe an underwriter may be less willing to the desired limit or charge a significantly higher premium. The standard comprehensive general liability policy, something a lot of people ask, typically exclude claims for bodily injury or property damage resulting from the use of a from an owned aircraft operated, rented, or loaned to an insured. Non-owned aircraft liability is again a legal liability protection and placed to protect against claims arising from third-party BI or PD, which has occurred as a result of the occupancy of an aircraft. Typically, non-owned aircraft liability is an ancillary coverage and no additional premium to a whole liability policy, and it is also something that other aviation policies will provide. Entities that don't purchase policies, include non-owned, must have specific non-owned liability policy placed. Due to the unknown nature of exposure, underwriters are not going to be able to assess risk without qualifying what the exposures are. So as we kind of round out the conversation, I think there are two other losses that sort of highlight the need for protection, or making sure that you're getting the proper protection under the hull and liability policy. First is the loss that did take place back in February in Southern California. There are multiple parties, and that's a complex claim because the primary operator had only a certain amount of protection inside their liability program. That liability limit, we believe, will be exhausted rather quickly with the number of defendants that are included in that case. One of the defendants, or one of the estates, has brought in air traffic control as part of the claim. And we do feel that soon the estate of the primary passenger, basically who put that charter together, will also be sued. We don't believe there is any kind of liability protection for the estate of the primary passenger, but because they arranged the charter, because they had flown so many times, there'll be theories of what happened, what pressures were applied, that they had to go, and basically there could be some liability that's assessed in terms of the primary passenger. A second, and probably a lot more relevant, we did have a celebrity who was flying back from an event that they were hosting in a city. Were flying back home with some friends in a chartered aircraft. I guess things got a little out of control after overindulging. There was damage to the seats. There was damage to some tray tables. There was damage to the aircraft carpeting and some of the other systems of the aircraft. All told, it was about $100,000. And as Allison can attest, anything in aviation, basically, you just add 3 zeros and that becomes the norm. So again, make sure that you're looking out for your liability. Make sure that you're looking at the various scenarios. Make sure that you're looking at a policy. If you're looking at sort of pricing out a non-owned policy, the general rule of thumb is $1,000 per million. So not overly expensive, and certainly as a peace of mind, providing you liability protection, and certainly something that can at a minimum provide defense costs excess above anything.
Great, thanks, Joe. So I have a question for you that I've been kind of stewing on, and it's gonna, I think, bring you two together. So I believe that Marsh is the #1 aviation insurance broker in the world in terms of size and scope and everything that you guys do. Can you talk specifically about working with the Helinet team? I just imagine that gives you so much, kind of view of what's going on, what the policies are. I'm just wondering if you can kind of speak to that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. I mean, we have a number of operations, and I think it helps Helinet, and it helps us and our other customers. We certainly look at data. We look at data around our system. I mean, Marsh has there's 72 aviation colleagues around the country, and all we do is aviation. So I'm not a generalist. I'm not somebody that places workers' compensation. My primary responsibility from waking up until I go to sleep is protecting great firms like Allison and Helinet. But it's also about bringing together a collective experience in terms of our view of the airlines, our view of the manufacturers, our view of airports, our view of corporate operators, charter operators, helicopter operators, and bringing sort of the best of all of those particular scenarios from the standpoint of contractual protections, from the standpoint of placement strategy, from the standpoint of making sure that we have the right relationships in place to support Helinet as they would go through a renewal to gain the best outcome with the greatest level of coverage. So I think it's about more harnessing the collective experience. I think that allows us a true perspective and vision into what really is going on. Not sort of the Rodney Dangerfield, stick your thumb up and figure out which way the wind is blowing, but really have a strategy that we can actually fall back on.
This is kind of the opposite end of a question that I asked Allison before, and it's coming up in all of the panels really, but through COVID, I think from a total cost of risk standpoint, how has the charter industry specifically been impacted? Kind of what are you guys seeing?
So I'll just spend a few minutes because I think it's about gaining a full level of perspective. The general aviation policy is not a program that's rateable on amount of hours they fly or amount of passengers they carry. The airlines are. So when you look at aviation as a whole, you've got the general aviation sector and you've got the airlines. And obviously every day we read about the furloughs, the layoffs, and just the lack of travel that's going on in the airline segment. And by all accounts, general aviation, fell off in the early months, but is starting to pick up and picking up at a pace better than the airlines. But unfortunately, what we find is that the airlines are rateable programs, and when an underwriter is expecting to collect an amount of premium to support and supply for losses that they're expecting, we're expecting close to $500 million of airline premium to basically be returned. So when you've got an expected loss amount, yes, claims are down, but we're still in the marketplace where 4 years prior we had losses in all aspects of aviation insurance. It's a tough pill for underwriters to swallow. So I think that we're benefiting and we're pushing clients to understand that yes, the marketplace is still evolving and changing, that might not necessarily be related to general aviation, but on the back end of it, we're trying to have individualized conversations with our clients and their underwriting relationships to make sure that we have the best outcome for them with their operations. So if operations are down, looking to try and trigger different aspects of the policy to return premiums, but also make sure that in this particular marketplace that we're looking at the strategy and deployment of capacity in the marketplace.
You guys are playing musical chairs on me, I think.
Sorry, you lost me for a minute. I'm back.
Oh, good. I was like, I hope her laptop didn't die. Here's one for both. I think you could probably both speak to this from both sides. But in terms of kind of high net worth passengers, entertainment clients, and their advisors, right? This is mostly business managers. What are they requiring before takeoff, or what are they kind of requiring from you guys?
You want to kick it off, Joe, or you want me to?
I mean, from our standpoint, there really aren't requirements. As we talked about in the program, we do see a fair number of our charter customers, our operators, request certificates of insurance. So I would start with making sure that you've got the protection, additional insurance status, waiver of subrogation, 30-day notice of cancellation as a minimum under the primary operator's policy. that would at least allow you to understand that should something happen and you be sued, that you at least have a baseline of protection. Beyond that, a non-owned policy or something that's designed to provide legal liability protection is a 12-month program. Whether you charter once or you charter 500 times, it provides you that holistic approach and gives you just that peace of mind that should something happen and there's a significant amount of wealth on board an aircraft, that you have your own liability protection and something's not going to happen to.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Joe did obviously an excellent job covering that. We're from the operator standpoint, we have a lot of the clients, they come to us and, they require those certificates of insurance. And, a lot of times we're working with folks like Disney and people that are actually going to be the ones managing the travel for the client and booking it. And they, of course, have very high insurance standards and safety standards. So, it's just great to work with the experts at Marsh who can, quickly turn around insurance certs, or if there's any requests that we're not familiar with that they're asking for, they can advise us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and most importantly, I think that, there are some third-party resources, and I guess, we've got the pleasure of working with Helinet that is at the top end of the safety spectrum. We do have perspective across the entire business, and there are a number of operators that I'm not going to, obviously the FAA and regulatory agencies, create minimum standards, and those minimum standards keep passengers incredibly safe. But what Allison and the Helinet team do, and what really resonates with the underwriting community, is all of the above and beyond. The amount of training that goes into it, the amount of safety resource that gets deployed, the infrastructure around just simply, just launching a flight, and all of the resources that the pilots and crew and everybody have access to, that creates a holistic approach. And those things do matter. And there are a number of operators that just sort of meet the minimums. So, somebody like a Helinet certainly would well be up and beyond.
Maybe one other one. So, I mean, you mentioned the incident, the unfortunate incident that you were talking about. But you mentioned, some of the basically that policy that was in place, some of the issues that's now leading to. Can you maybe speak to how do you guys work with business managers and similar situations in kind of educating clients on the right policies to put into place, the right going about that, I'd say, in perhaps a better way, in advance of something unfortunate like that happening?
It's about a dialogue, and it's a very simple, very quick dialogue, to be candid with you. The dialogue is going to be about what are the travel needs, how much of that takes place on an annualized basis, and for whom. Is it localized? Is it international? Is it that they own a fractional share and that the policy needs to be structured a little bit differently? So I think that it's a very simple conversation around basically the who, what, and the where. And then the underwriting process is relatively simple. We have a significant portfolio of this and sort of have automated the non-owned programs. So we can sort of flip something back pretty quick with a pretty firm and pretty realistic understanding of what to expect.
Mm-hmm. I have maybe one last question. It's a little bit off the wall, so forgive me. I don't know where it's going to land. I'm just curious, have you guys, I think maybe more on the insurance side, but had any requests to insure expeditions into like outer space or flights into, beyond the stratosphere? I've seen and kind of heard of, flights being booked basically into outer space. I don't know if that's something that you guys have come across yet.
Obviously, client data is confidential, but I can state that we are.
There you go. See, I didn't know where that was going to go, and that sounds awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you both. Thanks for bearing with us and getting set up here, but that was really fantastic to kind of see the deep dives on both of your sides. I think I'd love to do maybe a live stream with both of you. We do these live streams periodically. But in any case, thanks again to both of you. That was awesome.